As I watch Republicans block aid for Ukraine, I have to wonder, what the hell are we doing? When in the last 30 years did my party decide idiotic isolationist policies are in vogue? We stood against the Soviet Union and supported Eastern Europe as men like Kennedy and Reagan told Khrushchev and Brezhnev to go eat a dick. Now Republicans pathetically quake in their boots whenever Putin says the N-word, and I mean nuclear. So it pisses me off because we are just now starting to see our efforts work. And we look to give up? Russia ran out of stocks of weapons, so it begged North Korea, of all countries, for more. They're scraping the bottom of their population barrel, using immigrants and convicts as cannon fodder. But most importantly, we are destroying the Russian economy, the Russians' ability to fund its war machine, which Putin cannot survive. No leader ever has survived a wartime economy that doesn't produce any wins. The Russian economy shrank by 2.1% in 2022. This year, the Russian economy will only grow by 1%, and nearly all of that growth is in military equipment that contributes nothing to the future of their economy because it goes and gets destroyed in Ukraine. There was a 6% decrease in manufacturing by the end of 2022 in Russia, and there was a 13% decrease in high-tech manufacturing. Motor vehicle production was down by 48%. Farm equipment production was down by 13%. Computer and electronic production was down by 8%. Retail trade dropped by 10%, and wholesale trade in Russia dropped by 17%, signaling a downturn in consumer spending and business activities. European Union imports from Russia were cut by 58% in 2022, and by the end of 2023, it looks like they will exceed cuts of 75%. On August 10th of 2022, the European Union completely stopped importing coal. The International Energy Agency reports that Russian oil revenues are down 27% from previous years. The Russian decision to cut gas flows to the European Union failed miserably as the European Union found ways to restock its gas storage tanks both last winter and this winter. Moody's has downgraded 95 Russian firms, including most energy companies, reflecting a reduction in their creditworthiness, which means their borrowing costs are going through the roof. As hard as it is for Russia to find buyers for its goods right now, it is having an even harder time getting goods it needs from other countries. Overall, European Union exports to Russia were 52% below where they were before this war started. The European Union has reduced 78% of its dual-use technology items, which are crucial for not only like their TVs, washers, dryers, etc., but also military applications, which is why we saw them pilfering these chips and stuff from washing machines, Ukrainian equipment, etc. In response to the sanctions and their trade impacts, Russia has been seeking technology from China and India, with a 27% increase in imports of tech imports from China alone. But China is unable to fill the EU North American void, and the China-India conglomerate here are exploiting Russia's weak position, much to Russia's detriment. Between January and August of 2023, Russia's federal budget revenues from oil and gas, which is nearly 50% of all of its revenues, dropped by 52%. And to counter this drop, Russia raised taxes on its businesses, which pissed a lot of businesses off. As I said in a previous video, 1/3 of all federal spending next year will go to the military. That is an enormous amount and is going to anger the Russian people. Even then, that may still buy less because the Russian ruble sits at around 1 penny. Under Putin's leadership, at one time, the ruble was 400% stronger than it is now. Interest rates in Russia are at about 15%, which is crushing the average Russian's ability to borrow. And in the US, we're sitting at like 5.5%, which we are bitching about. So can you imagine 15%? A large portion of the reserves of the Central Bank of Russia are frozen in the European Union to the tone of 207 billion euros, some of which we might be able to allocate to Ukraine. There are going to be long-term consequences that the Russian people are starting to finally awaken to. Access to Western consumer tech is drying up. The exit of foreign companies and the sanctions have created challenging environments for investment, because reduced foreign investment coupled with technology barriers are going to hamper productivity and economic growth for a long time. Russia was already facing unfavorable labor markets because of demographic factors like its aging population and the fact that they just didn't have kids because Russia sucks so bad. No one wants to have children there. But you compound that with mass conscription and the fact that a lot of the conscripts are dying, that's going to exacerbate a lot of their labor problems. The increased lack of opportunities in the political climate are going to accelerate a brain drain that was already taken place. There are skilled and educated Russians seeking opportunities abroad, sneaking out of Russia and trying to go somewhere else. Something like 2 million engineers, scientists, tech workers, and other skilled labor have fled Russia since this war started, with 1.3 million of them being under 35 years old. Russians see themselves more culturally aligned with Europe than they do with China and North Korea. So the fact that Putin is driving Russia towards China and North Korea doesn't jive well with the cultural background of ethnic Russians and traditional Russians in Russia. And they're starting to have problems and starting to weigh on their psyche. A poll by the Levada Center, which is an independent Moscow-based polling organization, revealed that if given the chance, 21% of Russians would ask President Putin about when the end of the invasion of Ukraine is going to take place. Now, this survey, which was just recently conducted and is supposed to be a part of the Putin's Direct Line event on December 14th, where he has a press conference and phone-in sessions and have Russians pose their questions to their leader. I mean, it was canceled in 2022, though, so it might be canceled this year as well. But the most common questions surrounded Ukraine and the economy. Specifically, when's the conclusion of the Ukraine invasion? What about achieving peace? When's the mobilization ending? When Russia might win? Other concerns include salaries and the future of Russia. What are pensions and the future living standards looking like? And even 6% of respondents were wondering about when potentially Putin is going to depart from the presidency. However, all of this compounding effect that we are having finally on Russia takes time. Every month we buy Ukraine the ability to defend itself and defeat Russia on the battlefield is another month that Russia's economy crumbles, another month that the average Russian questions if what Putin is doing is worth it, and that grumbles about having to buy a Lada and not a BMW, or at least having to pay way more for a BMW because they have to do a backdoor deal through Kazakhstan. And the more they have to deal with knockoff iPhones, the closer we are to Russia's own people rising up in a 1989 style or even a 1917 style. It just takes time, and the aid that we in the U.S. give Ukraine buys them time while also being an investment in global prosperity to include our own prosperity. We are not dying in Ukraine. Hell, we are spending less than 1% of our total American economic output in Ukraine, and mostly via old equipment that we were going to destroy anyways. So if we can continue to aid Ukraine, buy them time, then maybe 1989 can turn into 2024.